The same power of God empowers you. The same need of man plagues man. Go out and do it, and God will be with you and give you the increase. Let your light so shine before men that they see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. In this day of shortcut evangelism, 3 minutes in the gospel, don't think you have evangelized somebody, say they, until you bring them across the line, whatever. I want to tell you, there are some cultures and some nations and some people who will never come to Christianity. Mahatma Gandhi went on to say this: the Christians will never make a dent in India until the Sermon on the Mount becomes a part of their creed. You hear that? I don't know what habits you have that you have not given up. I don't know what dreams you're pursuing that you have not given up. I don't know what things your hands touch that are not yours. I don't know what goals you've set that are ungodly. I don't know what places your feet are taking you that you ought not to go. But I'm going to challenge you tonight. If you claim to follow the person of Jesus Christ, are you willing tonight to lay it at his altar and give it up for him for the sake of his glory? When I look at all that God has done in this world, when you realize what philosophers will do to argue against the existence of God, it'll boggle your mind. One of my professors at Trinity, Dr. Norman Geisler, a brilliant philosopher, gave a documented illustration once of a man who'd lost his eyeball. He'd lost his eye in some very, very sad accident. But somehow through prayer and healing, this man was able to see. He had no eyeball there, but he was able to see. And after a tremendous manifestation that this could be done, do you know what somebody said after that? Well, it just goes to show you, you don't need an eye to see. One day we'll be seeing through our elbow, through our knee, through the back of our head, whatever. That's precisely what some skeptics have said. What is it going to take to convince you that God wants to speak to you, and God wants to speak to you loudly and clearly through his word? Are you going to constantly run? Let me give you two scriptural illustrations of how people can run from God and how you and I can do the same. Take illustration number 1, Elisha, a man running towards God. Illustration number 2, a man running away from God. Young Elisha was a prophet. He had locked his ministry with Elijah. And one day Elijah said to him that God has called you into this ministry to succeed me, and I will cast this mantle upon you, as it were. And Elijah says to Elisha, you stay here. I'm going to go to Gilgal, and I will return after a little while. Elisha says, sir, if you're going to go to Gilgal, I want to come with you. And both of them go to Gilgal, and there they learn of the holiness of God. After Gilgal is over, Elijah says to Elisha, you stay here, I'm going to go to Bethel. Elisha says, if you're going to go to Bethel, I'm going to go with you. They go to Bethel, and there they learn of the faithfulness of God. Elijah says to Elisha, you stay here, I'm going to go to Jericho, I'll be back. He says, if you're going to go to Jericho, I'm going to go with you. They go to Jericho, and there they learn of the power of God. Elijah says to Elisha, from here I'm going to go to the Jordan, that's my last stop, and I'll be back. Why don't you stay here? He says, if that's your last stop, I want to go with you, and then I'll return. They go to Jordan, and there they learn that even stones can be a testimony for God. How much more a person empowered by God. Elisha had been with Elijah through Gilgal, through Bethel, through Jericho, through Jordan. He'd feasted at the feet of his master, who'd been his predecessor in the prophetic ministry. Elijah then looked upon Elisha, and he says, you've been a faithful servant of God. What is the one wish you want before I leave this earth? And Elisha struck a conference there with him, stretched his chest out, broad-shouldered, locked eyes with him, and he says, sir, what I want is a double portion of your spirit. And Elijah, in an anticlimactic, ironical response, turns around and says, you have asked a hard thing. But you read the story, Elijah in his lifetime performed 8 miracles, Elisha performed 16. Only because he hungered and only because he yearned.